much easier. But we are still a society that worships political heroes and influencers.
Yes.
If people would spend less time defending their political god and just focus on specific issues, a meeting of the minds would happen so much faster.
Yes, that's right. So as a child, and this happens with most generations. Okay, this happens still with this generation. You're taught to be obedient and to follow authority figures, whether that comes in the form of your parents or the school or the government, but especially the government.
Hey everybody, if you hear that music in the background, that is EMF Lies. Welcome to Everything is a Lie, damn it, because everything that we have been told is pretty much a lie. The CIA director, William Casey, in 1981 said, "We'll know our disinformation campaign is complete when everything the public believes is false." He wasn't kidding. So that's why I created this show. But the guest I have on today is someone who is not so much about bitching about problems, but about solutions. And what's staggering to me is that he's only 24 years old now, I believe, and he is so hip to the bullshit. And so I want my audience to know, how does somebody this young get so tuned in and so eloquent in talking about solutions? And I bought his book about a year ago, back when I was running Martin Retro Radio full time. I interviewed him on my station, and I bought this book. Where is it? Yeah, Slavery Gone for Good. Yeah, that's it. You use the background, it's hard to do stuff like that. So, but I have it, and he's got a new book, and we're going to scroll and just and hopefully he'll pick out a couple of favorite parts, and we'll because his new book is called the Book of Opposites. And I'm intrigued by that title. So thank you for being here, Cory.
Thank you. I really appreciate the work you do, man.
All right. Well, hopefully this will get you on the radar of some of the people that I'm connected with. Like, I know that you're a big fan of my friend David, who is also known as San Joaquin Valley Transparency. So I will make absolutely certain that he sees this, because I think you two are two folks who should know each other as well, for sure. Yeah. But let's back up before we talk about the book. How does somebody your age even develop the concept as an unslaving the mind?
Yeah, so I got into my work on slavery and abolitionism not because I, went through the schooling system and learned from my parents all this untold history and philosophy and psychology, but out of merely asking questions about our world and then going down the rabbit hole of, okay, we are not free because I can't drink things like raw milk and, the taxes. And of course, people talk about their working really long hours and it's getting very stressful. The prices are increasing. People don't feel free. And I, do experiments where I actually talk to people and I ask them, are you free? Do you feel free? Many of them will even say that, what do you mean by freedom? How do you even define freedom? Right?
I've seen from your live streams where you do kind of like a man on the street and just randomly talk to people and ask them that. And that, you kind of blow people's mind when you just ask them that simple question.
Right. And so it's not that they just feel not free. It's that they also can't define freedom, many individuals. And so when you put those two together, you can also ask yourself the question, like you mentioned, opposites. What is the opposite condition of freedom? And I would say that's slavery. Some people may call it tyranny, right? Maybe slavery is a more extreme version of tyranny. But Slavery Gone for Good is this book I wrote talking about the fundamentals of what is slavery, what is freedom. And I got there because I asked the questions, well, what is it? Because nobody in school taught me that. My parents did not teach me that. It's kind of just a presumption like, oh, yeah, you're born in America, you're free. Oh, yeah, you have this constitution, you live in a democracy or a republic, you have certain freedoms. Right? You have the right to do this, the right to do that. But there's no clear definition or anybody kind of trying to figure out what exactly it is. And we say it's God given, we say it's natural. So that means it transcends just America. So that means that someone maybe in China can understand the very concept of freedom or right. But do they?
Well,
Can I?
I would say that a lot of people don't, and because I'm sure you heard this saying before, the best slave is someone who thinks he's free.
Hmm.
Um, People who bow to government's every whim, no matter how unconstitutional a mandate may be, that is not freedom. And I'm an agorist. I believe in a voluntary society, but I am interested enough in the law to at least hold government accountable to playing by its own rules. So when government can't follow its own rules, that's when I'm interested in what the law says. Okay, but no, true freedom is natural law. So go ahead and
Hmm.
continue.
Yes, and natural law is something that a lot of folks have studied as well, due to individuals like Mark Passio, who has like a 9-hour seminar on the subject, right? And it's very comprehensive. Now, what does he do? Through the course of that seminar, he breaks down these fundamental ideas. And the most common reaction that people have when they view that is, wow, this seems like something I already know, but I couldn't put into words. I couldn't define it. I couldn't put it together. And so he defines what is a right. He defines what is freedom. And it's not that you have to get stuck and say this is the only way to define it, but it creates a basis, a foundation from which all the concepts and all the actions that we take in our daily lives, that's where it stems from. Because it's like if we say we're using freedoms and we are exercising our rights, and this is the foundation, the whole groundwork to our whole country, but yet we can't define it or understand what it is, it seems like a really faulty way to live, or have a country, right? So I think people are getting more curious, and a lot of younger people are getting curious because they see their families are struggling and they want to have a voice and they want to maybe change the future. So they're asking those questions like, what are these foundational things? And so I tried creating a framework as well that's more encompassing, I would argue, than even natural law, because there's so many different systems of morality and ethics out there, and philosophers will debate about that for thousands of years. It's about understanding where could we come together. What are the moral fabrics that have been shared throughout history? Kind of like what C.S. Lewis did in his book, The Abolition of Man, looking at
So
the different
are
cultures.
you saying that young people today are uh, embracing this concept more than say people in their 20s 15 or 20 years ago?
I think there's always been an interest in trying to go against the previous generation, or question what the previous generation has done. I'd say because of the internet and because of different influential figures, maybe it could be everyone from Joe Rogan to Lex Friedman to Tucker Carlson to Nick Fuentes. People are challenging their beliefs a bit more, and they're more willing to also be fanatical about their beliefs, because the internet can feed you down an algorithm or a rabbit hole depending on what you search, right? Like if you watch one video about freedom, you're probably going to be recommended another video about freedom. And if you watch one video about Katy Perry, you're probably going to be recommended another video about Katy Perry. And
All right,
so,
you just validated my hunch in asking that question, and
sure.
that falls in line with. I guess you heard that Zionism pretty much is taking over TikTok, and the reason for that is because the establishment has completely lost control over the Israel narrative, and TikTok and Instagram too. A lot of information, accurate information, a lot of video footage, a lot of harsh critiques of Israel can be found on both those platforms. And so they have now acquired TikTok and they're censoring the hell out of people. And so that's why I think the internet has made a difference in why today's 20 somethings are far more aware of what's going on than when I was in my 20s.
Yeah, I think to some extent yes, and to some extent no. And this goes, I would argue, for every generation in different ways, because the technology is hardwiring our brain. It's distracting a lot of people. It's entertaining a lot of people. Some people want to look for the education. Some people do want to do the research, right? But back then, I think it was harder to access that information because, you had to have some big library, and maybe access to that was through the king or through the priest and through, some special court and special class, that in order to access it. Now we have information at our fingertips, so it is easier to access. That comes at the expense of, again, fanaticism on different ends, because people of let's say lower financial status nowadays could be more angry about what's going on, and that might prompt them to more action. But it could be action for, yelling on social media and trying to cancel someone, versus trying to actually educate their fellow man and produce content like you're producing. There's a whole bunch of avenues. The internet has opened up possibilities because it's a tool, so it can be used for all sorts of things, which means this generation is rather confused, and they have to have some sort of personal sense of direction. Otherwise, they're just lost in this brain rot world of TikTok that will feed them whatever is going to seek their attention. Right? There's billions of content creators at this point, and billions of videos, that a lot of information could also contradict each other. So how does one go on the path of truth discovery? You're right. There is a lot of truth information out there. When I say truth, I mean people who are asking those deeper questions. But you're right. There's also lobbies. You're right. There's also interests that are causing censorship. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg admitted to it on the Joe Rogan podcast. He said we were pressured to take down information that went against the status quo, and he's arguing that now they won't do it as much. We'll see, because they're just basically appealing to the common consensus of what they deem as the common consensus, of what they deem the experts say and the scientists say. So people are filtering things through what they want to see, and that creates a bias in the information. When I try to look at concepts like slavery and freedom, I am trying to look at all the different worldviews and what people will disagree on. Because I know, for instance, like I said, with natural law, some people may not like those strict defined definitions. But if we're going to understand freedom, it is so ironic that we would want to perhaps define it and put it in a box, because freedom is the very thing that says, no, I don't want to be in a box, right? So people are seeing that these algorithms are pulling them in. They see that the news media is fake. They see that the schools is pushing an agenda. They see that their teacher and certain celebrities are trying to make them pay for certain things and get into some cult-like behavior. And so they're like, okay, I need to get out of this. So it's less of what maybe needs to be taught, but more of what needs to be untaught, which is why you have systems like unschooling, which have been invented as opposed to schooling, which is to say, bring your kids out of the school system and bring them back to their sense of self, where they don't need all this external influence. So people
You
are
know,
coming to
and
that point.
I've heard people make the point, and I agree with it. People would probably um, adapt to a school of thought like you and me much easier, but we are still a society that worships political heroes and influencers.
Yes.
If people would spend less time defending their political god and just focus on specific issues, a meeting of the minds would happen so much faster.
Yes, that's right. So as a child, and this happens with most generations. Okay, this happens still with this generation. You're taught to be obedient and to follow authority figures, whether that comes in the form of your parents or the school or the government, but especially the government. That one doesn't get challenged, right? So that's the one that I know you and I talk about the most, and that's because that one's actually promoting violence. A parent can actually be loving and caring for you, and they should. But the
Right.
governments are not often very caring. They don't really know who you are, and they tend to cause the most amount of destruction in history. This is democide. This is the
Well, I'm
toxic
sure you know
contact.
from being a fan of Brian of Here's the Deal and High Impact. He makes it clear all the time what the definition of government actually means. When you look at the word derivation of the word
Mhm.
government is to control the mind.
Yes, gobernare mente, right, which means to
Mhm.
control the mind, or gravano mente. You can do that own research for yourself and find out that's maybe the etymology of the word. It's very interesting. Um, but even when it comes to terms like that, I try not to use that as my foundational argument, because words and translations can change a lot, and There's other ways to perceive that same definition. But that being said, I think it's very interesting, right? I mean, there's a lot of strange coincidences, like for the fact that government claims to be a source of order and protection, and yet causing the top cause of unnatural death, democide, in the world. People like Michael Humer, who wrote massive books on the psychology of political authority, argues that the number of government deaths are 4 times more than private murderers. So, is it really a source of security or is it a source of danger? Right?
Well, I'm
It's
sure you
very,
know the quote from Albert Camus: "Public welfare has always been the alibi of
mm,
tyrants." I use that a lot.
yes. Yeah, and so there's a lot to look at here, but when you start looking at statistics and you start looking at psychology and philosophy, you start to go deeper. Because I would say looking at politics, looking at the basic economics and struggles that people have and the basic issues that rise to the top is going to feed you down potentially other cult avenues where you say, okay, I want this person in charge of my life, whether it's Trump or Obama or Biden or whoever, because I think that they have the best, value system for the rest of the world. But then once you go deeper, you say, okay, these are all people partaking in the same political process. What is the nature of this political process? Okay, this political process is on the basis of the constitutions, this democracy or republic, and these rights and foundations. What are those things, right? But people don't go to that really deep level, which our founding fathers wrote a lot about in their texts, and I have them on my bookshelf. The art of virtue, amazing texts, and I don't hear them really talked about that much. You don't hear a politician going on TV talking about the philosophy of freedom. They're talking about what they can do for you and why you need to vote them in office and why you need to give them money. Everything is designed to encourage a cult-like behavior of obedience and lack of question of deeper enlightenment or philosophical terms.
And why is that their motivation? Why do you think that's their motivation? Is to foster a culture of
Yes.
obedience?
Because when you study history and philosophy and psychology, you're very much less likely to follow any particular political authority figure or any political party because you're going to be far more skeptical. You're going to be looking at so many patterns of history and you're going to see, wait, this is the same thing that has happened in Rome. This is the
Yep.
same thing that has happened in Greece and among the Sumerians in ancient Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago, and that
Yep.
maybe the terminology has changed, maybe the religions have changed, the culture has changed, but the same fundamental actions remain, which is that somebody is given the right over everybody else to commit immoral actions when nobody else has that right. It's that fundamental basis that doesn't get questioned in politics.
And I'm just curious. So, have you reached the point in your YouTube career now where you're starting to get trolled by people who try to discredit your message, or have they been leaving you alone?
I think it's a good sign if you start getting some trolls. It means you're making an influence.
Yeah.
um, the more negative press you get, the more influence you will make, especially when it comes to the modern internet. And that's how I'd say Trump rose to fame: is bad press is still good press. um, and maybe that's intentional, but no, I think most people actually respond quite positively to what I'm saying because I'm not
Yeah.
coming at it from a too emotionally reactive state. I try to reason, I try to philosophically ground arguments. The hard part is if, let's say, I'm doing it in a 1 minute or 2 minute video where there's lacking context. And, meanwhile, I have a whole book here with 500 pages where you get the full picture, right? So you can't expect everybody to understand the nature of freedom and all the tricks that are used on people to make them think they're free, like you mentioned before, when they're not. Like that's where it gets tricky. And this is why the rulers for thousands of years have changed the terminology and perfected their mechanisms, like Aldous Huxley said, basically predicting in his book, Brave New World, how the rulers would use narco hypnosis to control people. It is just classic cult behavior. You're not going to think you're in a cult. You're not going to think um, that you're enslaved. You're not going to think that you're crazy. But once you get out of it, then you realize just how crazy it is. But only once you're out of it. And everybody's going to convince you and say, well, you're in a cult, and you're just going to be in complete denial and say, what are you talking about? You're in a cult. And then it becomes
Well,
a
if it does start
political.
happening, Corey, if it does start happening, just know that these are not honest brokers trying to have a meeting of the minds. They're probably are just paid stooges who are trying to who are being paid basically to represent the interests of the state. So, if it starts happening, do not even argue with them. Don't even try because they make baseless observations. And and I don't think a troll has ever swayed anyone to their side.
Mm.
If someone ever is on your channel and they're just making wild baseless disagreements with you, it's not going to affect your audience because all it does is expose the troll, not you. And on that note, let's get into the book. You see it?
The most recent one, yes, The Arts and Books of Opposites, which stands for taboo, right? Because it's taboo to think differently.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I'm just going to scroll here and let's see. Use my arrow key here. Okay. Table of discontent. I love that. That's pretty clever. All right. Okay. Let's see. The fact I need to. All right.
I use a lot of humor and satire through the course of this book on
Good.
purpose because that helps portray truth, as you may know from comedians like George Carlin or Bill
Oh yeah.
Hicks, right? Which some people suspect is Alex Jones. You have all sorts of interesting dynamics in this book. I actually even have the numbers at some point go backwards for page numbers.
Wow.
So I do
Okay.
this on purpose because it's meant to spark an interest in different thinking, right? So you actually have to learn how to read backwards in
Wow.
certain sections of the text, um, or at least from pages right to left as opposed to left to right. But the whole premises of the book is to think about the opposite of everything you were ever taught ever, and the opposite of everything in your life ever. And to encourage you to find the opposites or the alternatives in a lesser degree to everything that you do. And the reason why, because if you're able to entertain that thought, you're able to expand your mind. You're able to discipline your mind through the use of, let's say, shadow work, right? Facing traumas, facing things you don't want to face, or facing cognitive dissonance within yourself, facing belief systems that you've long held that you believe to be true so long that you're unwilling to challenge them. So, because you're challenging everything in your life, it opens up possibilities to challenge everything else within your life. So, maybe challenging the government is a hard thing for some people. Let's just challenge this cup. Let's
Yeah.
challenge a piece of paper. What could I do instead of a piece of paper or instead of using a cup? I mean, it sounds so basic, but the more you scale it, the more you can critically think like, okay, well, how was a different type of cup created? How was a different type of table created? It was because someone thought that the original table was not as good enough, that it could have been made better, or that it could have been made totally differently. It took an inventive mind, a mind that was willing to escape the confines of the current reality to find a new potential reality. So, this actually has a lot to do with AI as well, because AI can help expand the human mind drastically. Again, if it's used as a tool, just like we talked about with the internet, it can be used to create more freedom than ever because of the infinite possibility of being able to ask any question, hold any conversation, and seek any form of knowledge. That is
Well,
profound.
I am way more skeptical of AI. Now, here's what I tell people: AI should be used, not relied on.
Hmm.
I also feel that it serves the agenda to make people think less, to rely on their own intuition, their
Right.
own instinct, their own experience, logic.
Well, that's
Uh,
right there. What you did right there was you distinguished the opposite. The opposite of AI is natural intelligence, right? So you just saw the bigger picture. So
yeah.
you saw one thing that I mentioned and you said, okay, what is he saying that he isn't saying? You literally just did the very method that I encourage in this book, but we don't always do that. We don't always ask ourselves, okay, what is the opposite of the very thing I'm saying? Is there a possibility that I am wrong? And remember what Socrates said, who's known as the father of Western philosophy. He said, I know that I know nothing, and that the first step to knowledge is recognizing your ignorance. That sounds like a very ironic statement, if you ask me. But what it does is it encourages a type of humility in oneself to seek more knowledge and then attain a greater wisdom. So ironic as it is, him saying he knows nothing means he actually knows everything.
Okay. All right. Where can people get check out your work?
You can check out this book on Amazon if you want, or you can reach out to me and I'll send it to you, because I'm very open about that. And if people want digital formats or other formats, they can check it out. Of course, I have the website theliberator.us, and I also
Good.
have my presence on every social media platform. But yeah, this is the latest book. Of course, it doesn't delve specifically into freedom, but it has a lot to do with it, as you can tell when I broke it down when it comes to expanding the mind, because there's different approaches to help free oneself, and this is a very deeply philosophical approach, I would say, that
Mhm.
doesn't directly deal with freedom but actually indirectly brings one to freedom. And there even is one of the opposites in the book, is what is the opposite of government, what is the opposite of religion, what is the opposite of school, and it's all in there. And I actually have a whole curriculum and everything in there as well, so people can check it out and to learn more.
Excellent. Well, and before we let you go, I just want to throw out a couple of random things. I want to know what your mind, how your mind goes on this. Um, what do you think is the real agenda behind the president using the narrative of high crime to occupy American cities with National Guard? What do you think's really going on there?
Yeah, so I think it's a warranted concern that many people have, that there's potential crime in their city and that there's crime in their country. But I want people to notice the language used here, first of all, their country, their city. And it starts to create a lot of nationalistic pride, which is what a lot of people wanted from Trump. And a lot of people are moving toward Christian nationalism, I would say, is on the rise more than any other philosophy in America, because people say we want America first. Meanwhile, like you said, Israel first, more like. But regardless,
Well,
America
see,
first.
that
Yeah.
mentality is being exploited
Yes,
for.
exactly. Right. Well,
Okay.
that always happens in politics. Is usually the good that people are looking toward is exploited for greater agendas that those same people do not see or are being are taking place. And so this again has happened for many thousands of years, and this occupied territory that we call America was once the Native Americans, but we don't talk about
Absolutely.
that, right? It was once before some probably other government and another government before that. There were literally thousands of governments before, but we say this is the one, right? This is the one created by God, written in the Constitution, made by God Himself somehow, even though it's clearly man-made, right? So
Yeah.
these are the claims that we make through our language. Now, why is language important? Amanda Montell is an expert on cult behavior, and she talks about fanaticism, which I mentioned several times. Language is the key. She's a linguist. When people are using words like us versus them, this is classic cult behavior. When we have to differentiate our fellow man simply because they live in a different country or they're of a different status or they didn't sign a birth certificate, a piece of paper, then we're dehumanizing our fellow man. It doesn't matter for what cause or what justification you have, right? If these people are criminal, then let's look at the criminals. But to say that one person's a criminal, therefore they're all criminals, is a generalization of collectivism,
Well,
right?
what I'm getting at is how come people cannot recognize a manufactured crisis? Because this migrant crisis
Yes.
is, and it was done right in their face. And before you answer that, I want you to
Mhm.
look at the sun from the perspective of the political stooge, because I do believe in the theory of the psychological condition known as pseudologia fantastica, which means that a lot of people believe their own bullshit. They tell lies, and so you have these politicians under the
Mhm.
spell of pseudologia fantastica, but yet you have these people who worship these idols who can't recognize that both parties manufactured a crisis right in their face. Explain how this happens.
Yeah, well, you are right about that. One party might bring the immigrants in, and then the next party says, "Oh, well, if you vote me in, well, then I will take them out," right? And it's like, well, didn't you
But
guys
both
create
parties
the
brought them
problem?
in. Both parties
Right,
brought them in.
right,
Both
right.
parties brought
Right. Well, and that's the thing, though, is that government, in order to exist, okay, it doesn't matter what we're talking about, it needs to have something that will allow the people to have faith in them, the politicians, and continue the political game. So there needs to be an out influence. There needs to be the person you blame. And by the way, the cult experts in the country, they don't talk about politics either because they're afraid. But one of them, Stephen Hassan, has a whole book talking about the cult of Trump, and he escaped a political cult himself. So you can do research on that if you will. Now, some people will say, "Oh, well, is that leftist? Is he a leftist?" Blah blah blah. He's not taking political sides. He's looking at the nature of the behavior. Can you discern? Right? Can one discern for themselves what is going on? And if you look at history and you look at the actions being carried out, they are upon our fellow man, and they are being scapegoated for greater agendas, right? So you just broke it down and said, well, there's this Hegelian dialectic essentially. You introduce this problem, you introduce this solution. Out of that, you create this anti or synthesis that
Oh,
happens as a
San
result.
Joaquin's going to love you. San Joaquin is officially, that's because he refers to the Hegelian dialectic all the time. All right, he's going to love
Right.
you.
Well,
All right,
that's
I'm
just
sorry to
one
interrupt you.
thing in their toolbook, right? But what about another thing that people commonly mention? Divide and conquer. Okay, well, here you have a bunch of people who are divided literally by borders, not just mentally, but physically. Not just mentally among the people who are deciding what to do with the border, but the people who are being influenced, escaping the border or crossing the border, etc. There are divisions everywhere. And at the end of the day, the same thing is happening, which is that we're dehumanizing our fellow man and saying they're not human. They are a American, they are a Mexican, they are this and that. And when we do that, we look at ourselves as this sort of ego identity, which many people will come to accept because, especially in the Western world, we're perfectly fine with doing this. But what it does is it categorizes us and dehumanizes us from who we really are. We're much more than the identities that we give ourselves. And this makes us far more prone to cult like behavior, right? Because I am this group and this person's not part of my group. So he doesn't serve my interest. Okay, I must deport him. I must use violence against him. Now, they're not going to do it themselves. They're going to hire some police force, some armed gang to do it for them. And it's going to be seen as righteous, as moral, even though that person may have not done any harm whatsoever. They just didn't sign a specific document that said that they're a citizen. They didn't go through a certain paperwork ritual, which is all arbitrary and made up by man, that decides if they are a citizen. Oh, but this is the way it's always been, and this is how it's all arbitrary. This is not based in any natural right or law or freedom. This is all made by man, claiming, well, this is how we create order in the world and we need to have it, otherwise there'll be chaos. So they use another scapegoat to justify another scapegoat to justify another scapegoat. And then you get so lost in the scapegoats, in the justifications, that you don't even know how to treat the system. You don't even know how to get out of it. So when someone asks, oh, well, Cory, what do you think about abortion? Oh, what do you think about the borders? I'd say these are two topics that are the most controversial. It's because these are set up to be against each other. When at the end of the day, the truth is so much more complex and bigger picture minded that most people can't even comprehend it. So if I even try bothering to explain the reasoning behind it and try to break it down, most people won't even get to that point. You see, because there's so much justifications of lies built up, it's almost impossible. It's like telling a doctor who has a patient who is on like 100 drugs how they're going to heal them and get them to natural medicine. It's like, okay, how could I get this person off of 100 medications or past their years of surgeries to finally get themselves off of all this medication? It's like, yeah, impossible. Can't be done, right? Because there's no
Wow.
comprehension in their mind of getting down to that very fundamental idea. because they've gotten so lost and confused into this world. So some people straight up in the independent media are just waiting for a collapse, waiting for everything to just fall down, and then they fall into defeatism and escapism, and then that is used as another ploy for the people in power to say, oh, look at these crazy people. So everyone's trying to justify their own worldview and then filter things through their own perception, and it actually ends up that we become more enslaved as the result. So we need to respect each other as human beings, not get trapped in our ideologies or identities. And that's how we're going to become truly free.
And you mentioned some people are waiting for a collapse. And so it's something I want to touch on before we wrap it up, because you're, again, about solutions. You're about healthy eating as well. I don't know. Well, you didn't know me before, but I've recently lost, over the last year or so, I've lost like over 60 pounds. I'm in the shape that I was in when I was in my early 30s. And I just do basic exercises, and I cook my own meals. That I very rarely eat out, because so much of the stuff is garbage. But you maintain a garden as well, don't you?
Yes. We're running an operation called Bigfoot Food Forest, 5 acres here in Newport Richey, Florida, in the United States. So everybody's welcome to be a part of it. We've been filming every step of the process, and it's really cool. I also have a food forest in our backyard. So technically 2 locations, and many of the plants we brought to the property are from our backyard because it's literally infinite energy. So that's another solution that would free people, that would actually bring people together, not drive them apart, which is simply growing food, as basic as that is, and which is why I share it. It's so profound.
And I bought actually through Brian. Here's the deal: through one of his promo codes, the My Patriot Food Supply. So I have about 6 months of storable food that lasts for 25 years. But that's not enough.
Right.
People really need to learn how to grow food, and so that's something that I've got to learn. And so we may have to just do another show where we talk just about that. Like, if a person just wants to get started, I know they say, all right, at the very least, get you a couple of chickens. Start there, and then and I know that potatoes are very easy to grow. So I know that much. But so I would like to have you back so we can talk about that. And I was looking for, you have a PayPal, correct?
A PayPal? I mean, yeah, I think
I was
so.
looking for a way to donate, and PayPal is the way that I can donate to
Looking
people.
for a way to donate for me is pretty difficult because I never ask for money. But I do.
Okay.
No, but because of the local project I'm doing, people financially supporting me would be fantastic, and also because there's a lot of family troubles with other relatives in other states and other things happening that would be nice to have that support. But it is what
Well,
it is. I never expected to get money off of this work.
and I admire you for that. But
Mhm.
put a PayPal icon on your website, and so people like me, we can float you, because I mean, you're it costs money to do what you do.
Yeah,
It costs money
a good
to do what
amount.
you
And now that I've run 4 websites, especially
do. So
healthrevealed.org, now bigfootflorida.com, and nita.one and theliberator.us. And then, of course, I helped with originsreclaimed.org. I also helped with patriotgreenproducts.com. And yeah, so, and again, I've done all this work for free for the past 4 or 5 years.
no, you're at the point where there's nothing disingenuous about you putting donation links in the about section of your YouTube channel, or in the description of your, because I've been wanting to. That's why I bought your book, because I couldn't find a damn PayPal. I said, well, let me buy his damn book, So, but I donate to people a lot through PayPal. The ones who aren't censored by PayPal. A lot of people use Cash App. I don't use that. So I would like to, just for people like me, I would like to see you add a donation link to everything you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
All right. If it's like 100 years from now, and somebody finds this video, what do you want the message for that person to see from you?
It's a heavy question.
Yeah.
um, I think it's easy to say it with words, but I I of course have a message that I believe will transcend my time, and that is that nature is the answer, right?
Mm.
So if one were to ask a question on behalf of the title of my main work, I in 100 years later or 200 years later, it would have to be the message that nature is the answer. And I think that's also evident because AI is on the rise, but of course faster than we could even conceive. 100 years from now, imagine just how advanced it will be. If somebody is consumed in that world so much, they won't even be able to understand any idea of nature, if depending on their level of consumption, especially if you're like in the city surrounded by it. So and I know maybe 100 years is a lot to comprehend. For me, I think that's like 1,000 years in current time, right? So because of just how fast things advance, I would have to say nature is the answer is a rather important thing to understand. And what does that mean? Um, you can relate it to God, you can relate it to faith, you can relate it to truth, right? It's not just some trees outside, it's not just permaculture, it's not just voluntarism. It's a continual evolution in knowing thyself and knowing the tools by which we know ourselves. And those tools are most likely to be with nature present, not nature not present. With artificial intelligence, it can sometimes give the illusion like we don't need nature because AI will do it for us. But if AI is so good at what it does, it serves nature. And so natural intelligence or nature is the answer is the main message I have to share probably for
Yep.
generations.
Yep.
And that's probably going to be my answer. But I would hope that I also have kids that also can, I
No,
think,
nature is the answer. I
continue
agree
that
with you.
message, because it's
I,
it's hard to say what will be then, and my kids will be able to deliver that answer better than me.
well, and I mean, and again, not to be a Debbie Downer, but
Mhm.
we know how Israel uses Palantir technology to
Mm.
target and literally kill people. We know this. We also know that there is a transhumanism agenda
Mhm.
to merge man with machine. And in my opinion, this is my opinion, folks. So this is not, I'm not speaking for Corey, I'm speaking for me. I believe that the transhumanism agenda is a way for people who don't accept God, people who like brazenly reject God, to have an eternal life, eternal salvation without being doomed to eternal damnation.
Mhm.
They're fools. It's not going to work. But I believe that that is the motivation behind all of that.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. So, and I think it just gets challenging because it will be mainstream thought that, what I say nature is the answer, what we're saying is going to be mainstream thought very evidently. And so 100 years from now, or like I said, 1,000 more realistically, is going to it's that it's going to be very different, more than we can conceive, because the narrative is going to shift so much, and people are going to be saying what we're saying. So it means that there's going to be something far more relevant than what we're saying, but it's still going to be under the premises that nature is the answer, because I'm arguing it's an
Yes.
unescapable truth.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, sorry to end on such a heavy note, but that's just,
No,
but
no, you're
that's how,
good.
you know, that's, let's be aware of what they want to do, but that doesn't mean that they're going to win. Okay.
Hmm.
So
No, no,
you are still ahead. I wish when I was your age, I didn't know crap about crap. You know, I was a believer of the I was an advocate for the Democratic Party. I, looked for politicians to be my political savior. And I was disappointed by all of them, one by one by one by one. And it wasn't until my late 40s where I finally realized what you see above my head, everything is a lie. So, but it's a pleasure to know you. I feel blessed that I know you. And I hope we can do this again. But again, get some donation links and everything so a brother can help you out. All right.
No problem. Thank
all
you.
Right. Cory Endrulat, author. My goodness, what is your main? How do you mainly call? What do you call yourself? Author.
Abolitionist.
Life coach, abolitionist. All right, abolitionist. Yep. All right, that's a lot of syllables, but I'll make it work. All right, thank you, Cory. And this has been Everything Is a Lie, Damn It. Hope you all got something out of this, and we will see you on the next episode.